Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by the one and only Dan Dix from Press for Truth. Thank you for joining us again, Dan.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having me.
All right, now I'm a little bit groggy today, but I got something, and I got something that's big because, a lot of people out there, when they think of the deep state, they think of, well, Obama holdovers. And that's kind of a new kind of thing that's come up in the last few years for, myself, Dan especially, going back years. We've been talking about kind of the deep state, but in a whole different light. It wasn't Obama holdovers, nor was it Bush holdovers. It was actual deep state, invisible government that was able to pull the strings of these puppets that we call politicians on a regular basis throughout the world. And it's been something that has kind of annoyed me lately, Dan. We've seen a lot of people go, well, Trump is fighting the deep state. But of course, we got to bomb Syria, and of course, we got to keep printing money out of thin air and all this kind of stuff. To you, what is the deep state?
To me, Josh, at this stage in the game, the deep state is an apparatus. It's a system that is in control of what we often refer to as the secret government. And I think it's something that's been in the works not just for decades, but quite literally for centuries and centuries. And you've got some key families in there. People like the Rothschilds, Josh, are not just going to allow someone like a Trump to come along and fool the system and manage to beat the illusionary system that they have set up, which is democracy, which is the illusion of choice. It's just not possible at this stage in the game. I often refer to them as the puppet string pullers, because as you said, Josh, these guys are puppets at this stage in the game. You cannot become president of the United States unless you have been ordained to be so. Now, having said that, it's quite possible that someone can be used as a pawn. It's quite possible somebody might even get in there who doesn't understand how they are being used. But I'm saying today, for the record, if somebody is in, like a Donald Trump, it's because the deep state allowed it to happen.
Yeah, we could all say all day that he has good intentions. I've personally believed in the past that he does. But when you look at the fact that back in when Bush was running for office for the 2000 elections, it was he wants to audit the Federal Reserve. He's anti-establishment. And he's anti-war, he's non-interventionist. And then we saw what happened. And then Obama, he's anti-war, first black president, he's anti-establishment. About as establishment as it gets. And now it's like Trump, and it's like every single time they need to get a little bit more smarter because they know that the masses aren't as likely to be fooled with this new puppet. But of course, we see the military-industrial complex continue to get larger. And yeah, there's a few things here and there where we feel like maybe certain things were put off a bit longer, but not put off forever. And that's one of the major issues here. What do you think about this involvement in or meddling in foreign, affairs, the proxy wars around the world? I mean, how much does this have to do with the deep state? Because I've always believed that, hey, if a president says, we aren't going to go into that country, I don't care how many of you have a gun to my head, then he'll just end up with a bullet in the head. But apparently Trump is immune to this, and he's just working on, a 5D, 100D baseball or whatever to be able to maneuver around these massive global issues. It's absurd. What do you think about the military-industrial complex's relation to the deep state?
Oh, he's a genius chess player. It's all just a brilliant foresight move. That should have been one of the glaring obvious signs to people that it is, in fact, the deep state behind the things that are pulling the strings in regards to Trump when he bombed Syria. After saying over and over and over again that this is something he would not do. That should have been a big wake-up call to his supporters and followers to realize that it's not necessarily up to him what's going to happen in the Middle East. And you mentioned, Bush and the early years with the Democratic campaign back with Bush. Let's not forget who he was running against back then, Josh. John Kerry, somebody who was in the same secretive organization, the Skull and Bones Society, that he himself was a member of. Only 15 people per year get tapped, as it's called, to join the order once every year at Yale University. And these guys were running against each other for president of the United States. So that was going to be like a blatant sort of slap in the face to people to be like, no, this isn't a choice.
Yeah.
This is obviously all more choreographed than a ballet here or a professional wrestling match. No, that didn't wake people from their slumber, but maybe this will. Hopefully people will start to see that, even somebody who seems to have the good intentions is not going to be able to do just whatever he wants. It's the deep state who's in control.
Well, yeah, and before that, it was Bush versus Al Gore. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Obama versus McCain,
Right.
and then Obama versus Romney. And I mean, you couldn't even tell the difference between the two, except for one was white and one was black. I mean, otherwise, their ideology was practically the same, with slight differentiations that benefited their, pull in certain areas of the country. But with Trump, one thing I noticed was quite interesting is that we've often heard the media controls the mind, and it's very true. It's starting to teeter off these days, but all the same, looking at the election, Donald Trump was up against the mainstream media as it appeared. So the mainstream media, when they blacked out Ron Paul, they just didn't talk about Ron Paul. He'd win polls, and they would take him out of the poll and then show the second place as a winner. I mean, it was incredibly blatant, but they wouldn't mention Ron Paul's name. They gave him very little time during the debates. Well, Trump runs, and all they do all day is bash him, and it's like the Barbra Streisand effect. Don't go over here, folks. Okay, well, everyone's going to go over there now. And they were so full of blatant lies in the media and the mainstream media about Donald Trump that it made a lot of people love Trump, and it almost appeared as if it was psychological warfare. What do you think about this idea that, the media, as an obvious part of the deep state, could come in there and maneuver people's minds like Operation Mockingbird, and it kind of make people believe that the media is against them, the establishment's against them, all the while really behind closed doors kind of propping him up? What do you think about this idea?
Well, let's take a look at the Russian hacking meme or the Russian hacking narrative, for example, coming out from the mainstream media today. Every time right now that I hear the name Mueller or Comey or Tapper or I hear about the memo or the dossier or whatever, it's all a huge distraction right now to get us thinking that there isn't a deep state, that there were other outside forces that were at play here that sought to get Trump elected, not selected. So all of this current media stuff, it's all smoke and mirrors right now to play into the illusion that Trump defeated the system. But we know that Russian hacking narrative is completely false. They've never provided any evidence for this. But let's not get carried away. And let's remember that that doesn't even matter, because these are selections, not elections. Mm-hmm. So we can't lose track of the fact that there is a deep state, there is a secret government, they are in control here, and it doesn't matter who you vote in. It's not going to defeat the current system by voting in the next boogeyman.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge distraction, this Mueller story. Every time I go digging for news, and I know that you probably can relate to this, Dan, I go digging for news to report on, and I'm digging through things, and every second story is Mueller, and then NAFTA, and then Mueller, and then NAFTA. And that's all that you can find in the media. When I look up, for example, Bill Morneau in Canada, the finance minister, I'm like looking for something money related, and every single one is trade war with the United States and trade war with China. And it's like, I don't care. This is a distraction story that's obviously perpetuated. And interestingly enough, the media kind of conditions us for certain things to come. And I've noticed in the last while, there's stuff about Bolton talking about the Syrians are going to chemical gas their own people for no reason again. And it's a huge concern, kind of getting us ready for maybe again on the exact year anniversary of the last alleged attack. There's going to be another, and then into Syria we go, each time more extreme. And with that, I wanted to go into an article that's coming up lately, because there's, like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest forms of the deep state is the military-industrial complex, and they're getting more and more intense in their, I guess you could say, aggression, whether it be trying to get people to want to bomb Russia, which is absurd, or just wanting everyone to join the military for the next big war, as we saw so many times in the past. And as the Zero Hedge article says, Army Secretary wants hypersonic weapons on battlefield in next 10 years. And as it goes into, hypersonic weapons capable of striking Russia and China, notice it mentions that in the article, at Mach 5 or higher could be the Pentagon's answer in correcting Americans' hegemony that is widely perceived to be in terminal decline. Army Secretary Mark Esper told reporters at a Defense Writers Group conference in Washington, D.C. Wednesday that hypersonic missiles and directed energy weapons are critical to the service's top modernization plan, said military.com. And I quote, long-range precision fires at the strategic level is a capability that we need to ensure we have overmatch in future conflicts. And I think that the way to get to it is through hypersonic, said Esper. So I find it interesting, first of all, that like every article about increasing the arsenal of the military-industrial complex has to mention Russia. It's always Russia as, you know, the selling point. Like one day we're going to get into like a nuclear war with Russia, as if we should be impressed and excited about that. And now they're developing these hypersonic weapons that they hope to get on the battlefield, as they say, about by 2028. So, and not that they're not already being used secretly. So, like, what do you think about this, Dan? We have this military-industrial complex trying to push us into an incredibly violent war that uses hypersonic weapons and direct energy weapons, things that we were all called crazy for talking about for years. I mean, what do you think about that?
Let's make no mistake about it. These weapons were intended to be used against the American people, against the Canadian people, against the people of the West. But these sorts of things have to be done incrementally, right? You can't just all of a sudden introduce, you know, these weapons that you know have been used in places like Baghdad all of a sudden in the streets of America or Canada. It has to be done incrementally, and that's what they do. And you know, we can see this in the past. Look at the LRAD cannon. This is the long-range acoustical device, which was okayed for use in protests. So this is something that was originally used in places like Baghdad. This is a frequency machine that shoots a beam at you that basically makes it's so loud. It can potentially make your skin feel like it's getting hot, but it's so loud that you got to get out of there to protect your eardrums, essentially. This technology was developed to be used on terrorists in the Middle East, but let's not forget, there was an intention to bring it right here at home, and now we're seeing it. So we've seen it with LRAD, and you know, I'm not surprised we're going to see it with these other kind of technologies they're developing. I mean, recently we heard about these sonic weapons being used in the embassies in Cuba, where this was clearly a sonic weapon being used. So yeah, it's already happening here. So we got to face the music and realize this isn't science fiction. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't stuff of the movies. This is the New World Order, and it's here.
Yeah, and I mean, the CIA, there's records going back to their earliest days testing this on citizens throughout the United States in small towns using direct energy weapons as kind of like a test, making people sick, making people throw up, making people depressed, that kind of stuff. It's been going on for a long time, and we've been called crazy for a long time for talking about it. And unfortunately, it's coming to fruition. I'd much rather be called crazy and be wrong than, unfortunately, be right about this incredibly horrible stuff that's happening around us. But with that said, you know, if we have an issue with it's a religion, and that religion is statism. This religion of, well, we need to depend on government. We need it surrounding us. This leader will replace that one, left, right, back and forth. You know, even the smallest government, as we see in Canada, Andrew Scheer, incredibly big government conservative. How he's even calling himself a conservative is insane. But, you know, another big government conservative, and you know, small government still grows. It's like cutting off 95% of a tumor and expecting the 5% to just drift away. I mean, it's going to keep growing. Even the smallest forms of cancer will grow if you don't get rid of it. So, I mean, what do you think about this left-right paradigm? Because that really comes into play here, Dan. I know we've been talking about this for years, and a lot of the viewers might already be well aware of the subject. But I always get comments on my videos, well, Donald Trump is going to save things. And I wish he could, but I think it's more important that we as individuals fix things rather than constantly look to these higher than, these saviors that everyone looks up to change everything and magically make everything better using the same apparatus that caused the problems in the first place. So what do you think about this massive left-right paradigm and how it constantly switches over and over again and has for so long?
Well, I think you nailed it, Josh, is that we have to, forgive me for the cliche, be the change that we want to see in the world. So people are recognizing the manipulation. They are seeing that we're being controlled here and being played off against two sides for one another. So what's the logical conclusion then? What do we have to do? Well, we have to start seeking these answers for ourselves. We can't be looking to elect this guy or this guy, Coke or Pepsi, essentially. We have to do it for ourselves. And as they always explain to us in our schools, we are the government. We are this thing that makes up this thing called government. Well, it's true. Well, let's start actually, making it practical and starting to live it out in our own lives. And the way you do that I've found personally, is to unplug from the matrix, if you will, to disconnect, to have no longer anything to do with it, not to enter into contract with it. If you don't have to be involved with the banks, don't be. If you don't have to be, involved with any kind of licensing in any way, don't be if you don't have to be. Just remove yourself as much as possible. And when we get enough people do that, Josh, as we've been saying for years as well, the system is set up in a pyramidal structure. But we make up the base of this thing. So it really is just a matter of enough people in the base of this realizing that they have the power to step out and say, no, I don't like this system. I'm not going to have any more to do with it. And then the whole thing comes crashing down. So that's what it boils down to, Josh. We have to always remember that we truly have the power in this pyramidal structure. It's just about time we realize it.
Yeah, we can't be dependent on those that are dependent on our dependents. And that's something I find myself saying more and more often lately is that, look at how they build this puzzle piece over time. We've seen this. If you look back at history and read the whole story, you don't just read the end of the book. You have to read the whole book. When you go back a bit, you notice that, they armed and funded these rebels. Then they armed and propped up these governments. Then these governments, were violent towards the citizens. So our governments went in there, bombed them, killed men, women, and children, millions of them over the last century, and then armed and funded the fathers, the extremist fathers and brothers of the people that they killed. And then they say, well, coming to the country will give you welfare. It divides people against each other. So you have both sides attacking each other instead of attacking the real enemy or calling out the real enemy that really caused this problem in the first place. And the same goes for like Mexican immigration. Let's fly guns into Mexico and Colombia and Argentina and all those places. Let's start the war on drugs and attack people for using cannabis and stuff like that, propping up cartels, arming them at the same time. And now here we are all these years later. Well, all these Mexicans are coming up the border with guns. Oh, well, okay, maybe the government shouldn't have armed them in the first place, created the drug war, all this kind of stuff. Government is going to solve the problem. We need to look to better solutions in order to stop perpetuating this for eternity. Because as Dan mentioned, it does come down to us. We need to unplug. We need to decentralize. We need to rule ourselves and be far more self-sufficient. People aren't self-sufficient enough anymore because they've moved into the big cities away from the farms. They don't know how to provide for themselves, and it's gotten really, really bad. So I think that you make a really good point there, Dan. And wrapping it up, I wanted you to tell us what's the latest happening at Press for Truth. I'm always excited to hear of your new reports and videos coming out. What's going on at PFT?
Sure. Just in closing, I want to touch on one key word you said there, Josh, is decentralization. And I think moving forward, that's something we're going to have to focus on, is these decentralized platforms, these decentralized systems, and decentralized institutions that are starting to pop up as a response, to the tyranny, essentially. So that's something we have to keep an eye out on. Good examples of that, of course, are some of our favorites, Steemit, DTube. Some of these decentralized video sharing platforms is something very important moving forward that we're going to have to continue to focus on. But as for me, yeah, it's been a lifesaver for me, and I think it's still in its infancy. DTube and Steam is still in beta. There's still a lot to come about this. So now is a good time to get involved. Because we haven't been completely cut off from the system just yet. We haven't been Alex Jones just yet, but that might be coming soon. So now's the time to get. Yeah, we have to protect ourselves now, you know. So yeah, I'm focusing on that. I'm you know, of course, I'm banging out as many videos as I can at Press for Truth. And obviously, if you're not subscribed there, what are you doing? You should be. youtube.com/weaving spider is the site, and pressfortruth.ca, of course, is the website.
Weaving spider, come not here. Well, you have always shown yourself to be a weaving spider. You can, you've done incredible work over the years, Dan, and I really appreciate it. And, you know, this is what it comes down to, folks. We gotta, you know, the independent medias, it's different from how the mainstream medias all work together, collaborate to disinform the public or misinform the public. The independent medias work together not by competing, but by trying to bring the same message to the people of true individual liberty, freedom, truth, and in the end, that's way more important. We have to sometimes use the tactics of the guys that are distracting us and using propaganda against us in order to turn it around on them and show them that, hey, look, we are just working from our homes. We're on our cell phones like Dan on a monopod or, you know, stuff like that. But we're still beating the viewership of a lot of the mainstream medias. We're still getting the message out at a much more further rate than the mainstream media is. And it goes to show that the bread and circuses are coming to an end, folks. It's one way or another, it is going to go down. We've seen decreased viewership in NFL, decreased viewership in Hollywood, decreased viewership in mainstream media. And there's a reason for that, because as with the Romans, the bread and circuses are over and people are starting to wake up. And I wish that all of you can join us in that revolution, because it's coming and you cannot stop it. You cannot stop an idea whose time has come, as a great man by the name of Dr. Ron Paul once said. So anyway, thank you very much for going into this with us, Dan. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson with Dan Dix, signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency. Steem, that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, you know, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.